When I'm in a state of neurotic mental pain, or any mental pain for that matter, it's as if every little bit of me is engaged in straining for relief from that pain. That's what mental pain is. It is the thing that makes us strain as much as we can to get away from it. Obviously, this straining to get away from the pain doesn't work. Or it doesn't work in a lot of cases. Sometimes it might work. If it does work, then we're in pain and we strain for relief and we get the relief and that's the pain gone and we forget about it. So that's a very different type of thing. But when we're talking about chronic mental suffering, what we're talking about is pain that we can't get away from by straining. Obviously, otherwise the thing wouldn't exist. There would be no such thing as chronic mental suffering. So the whole point is that our straining doesn't help us. And not only that, our straining for relief or from escape, or for escape, or for trying to straining it towards the goal of some kind of solution to our problem, it isn't just that doesn't work, but it actually aggravates the situation and causes the pain to be worse as a result of trying to escape the pain. In one way, we can say that this is obvious enough, because if my whole being is in a state of straining, just the same as if my physical body is in a state of continual straining, this is cramp. So on the one hand, we've got physical cramp, which we know is painful, and then we've got this mental cramp of attempted straining that isn't getting anywhere. And that's very painful as well. And there's no let-up in it. We can't uncramp ourselves, because being uncramped would mean no longer straining for relief or escape from the pain. And that's what we can't do, because the pain is the pain, and what the pain is pragmatically something that we involuntarily try to escape from, something we have to escape from. It's not optional. It controls us. The need to escape mental pain is a controlling factor. It overrides our will. More than this, it becomes our will. That is our will. That's all we want. Just the same as people who say they want to win. And this isn't really our will. It's a striving that is taking us over, and we imagine that it's us who want to win or succeed, when really it's this involuntary striving. So that's the striving after a positive outcome. This striving away from a negative outcome is equally involuntary, equally controlling of us. Any sort of striving is, that we don't at all see this because we're blinded by our state of identification with the striving, which makes us think it's me that's striving because I want to obtain the outcome, or because I want to avoid the outcome. So we can say that the striving itself is painful, but there's more to it than this. Because what we've actually done when we strive for relief or escape is we've created a polarity. And a polarity, from a psychological point of view, is a trap. It's something we get very, very trapped in. And the reason we get trapped in is because we don't see the polarity for being a polarity. If I'm in mental pain and I'm trying to escape, I'm fixated on the projected escape. So that's one pole. That's the pole of relief, the pole of escape. And I just see that and I strain after it. What I don't see is that in any polar situation, what we're really looking at is two opposites that are the same thing, just like up and down are the same thing. If you have a ladder and you lean it up against the wall, then there's a basic polarity in this ladder. You can climb up it or you can climb down it again, but it's the same ladder. The road there is the same as the road back, as Heraclitus says. So what this means is that by turning our whole world into a polarity, what I don't like and what I'm trying to get away from, and what I like and I'm trying to get to, by not seeing that, by chasing one, I'm actually chasing the other, I get trapped. So it's the lack of insight into what is sometimes called the identity of the opposites, i.e. the sameness of the opposites, which is familiar to us in terms of the yin-yang sign, which is a visual representation of these two apparently opposite things being the same thing. So we can understand the yin-yang symbol, even if the idea of the opposites being actually not opposite, as in terms of being completely other to each other, but are actually completely the same thing, two sides of the same thing, is not so easy for us to understand. So we're potentiating the pain that we're in by trying to escape from it. We're making it more, everything's become black and white, and all we can do is keep spinning around on this wheel of black and white. And even if we were to escape the pain, which, as I was saying, we can't, but even if we were, and in everyday life, which isn't, in which we're not caught up in a mental cramp the whole time, even though we might be sometimes when we get stressed or in the grip of desire or fear, it does seem to us that we've achieved what we want to achieve. And so we don't see this as being a wheel of suffering, as the Buddhists say. But it is nonetheless, because by making a certain outcome very meaningful, very important to me, I've also made the opposite outcome equally important, equally meaningful to me. So I've created a spectre. As good as the good thing is, the bad thing is just as bad. And there's no separating them, because one follows on the heels of the other, just like failure follows on the heels of success. Or an insult follows on the heels of flattery. So I could say, flattery is good, and I like flattery, and when people flatter me, that's great, because when they come and flatter me, then straight away it's like, I feel really good. So I say it's good because I feel good. But at the same time that I have made myself susceptible to flattery, dumb enough to believe it for what it appears to be without looking into it to see that actually it doesn't mean anything because it's flattery. So I have to dumb myself down to believe flattery to be true. But as soon as I do that, at the same time, by the very same action, I am dumbing myself down so as to believe that insults are real. So because I want the sweetness of the flattery, that also puts me in line for the sting of the insult. So I'm vulnerable. I'm going to feel the pain just as much as I felt the gratification. So, and neither of them are real, because neither flattery nor insulting or blaming is a real thing. Like if we were in our right minds, someone comes and flatters us, we wouldn't feel good because it would be meaningless. It's just meaningless. They're just trying to get around us. And in the same way, if someone comes up and starts slagging us off and calling us bad things, that's not going to mean anything either if we're kind of in our right minds, because that kind of stuff, it's kind of playground stuff. It's dumb. It doesn't mean anything. To call someone a bad name doesn't mean anything. It doesn't in any way change things. It's just them coming out with some stupid crap. So insults only insult us when we've made ourselves dumb in this kind of a way that we're identifying with the self that loves to be flattered and which hates to be insulted. So that's the other reason that getting involved in a polar situation, where I am is the unwanted outcome, and where I want to be is the wanted outcome, and I strain very hard to get from A to B, is not a good thing, because all I'm doing is making it a bigger and bigger issue when it doesn't need to be an issue. If I stop struggling so much, it might still hurt, but it won't be so tortuous an issue, because I'm actually saying that this pain is absolutely unacceptable, absolutely unendurable, and I have to get out, and yet I can't get out. And the more I strive, the more I'm giving myself the message that this is absolutely unacceptable, absolutely unendurable. So that's what happens when we're in mental pain. We strain to be free from it, and that straining is dysfunctional. Even though we're trying really, really hard, and we're so motivated, super motivated. Every little bit of me wants to be free from this pain. I'd do anything. So then we come on to therapy. So the funny thing about therapy is that we could very easily assume that therapy, okay, we have to do the same thing. We have to strain to get away from the pain, make an effort. But that somehow we're going to strain in a better way, in a more scientifically informed way, in a more effective way, in a more skillful way. Now, an awful lot of us would think that that is what therapy should be, the willed or purposeful attempt to move out of our pain and find relief from it. But it isn't, because that is exactly what we do anyway. Everyone who is in mental pain strains to escape that mental pain. There are no right ways or wrong ways to escape from it. There's no more effective ways or less effective ways, for the simple reason that straining doesn't free us from anything, mentally speaking. Physically, if I strain myself and run 50 miles to get away from some situation, yeah, that will get me away from it. But we're not talking about the physical world, we're talking about the psychological world, the inner world, in which case running doesn't distance us. What desired separation causes a connection, as Douglas Fleming says. So it doesn't matter how skillful and supposedly scientifically informed our way of enacting desired separation is, because desired separation is desired separation, as Douglas Fleming says, and as he also says, desired separation forms an attachment. Now that's not too hard to see when we step back a little bit and look at it, because we can kind of see that if we try and forget about someone who's annoying us, we just remember them more. And if I try and repress memories that I don't like, even though I may be temporarily successful in my denial, I've actually created a very, very intense connection with them. Because once I'm in denial of whatever painful emotions or memories I have, that stance of denial dictates my whole life. Everything I do is secretly driven by my need to escape. Everything becomes just this act of denial. There's nothing more to me than that. And I haven't escaped it at all, because it's still there at the very core of me, waiting like a jack-in-the-box to jump out with incredible force, absolutely incredible force. And the more I have strained in the course of my life to separate myself from the unpleasant or uncomfortable awareness the more force there is when it finally jumps up at me like a jack-in-the-box. All my straining to be separate from it did was put power into the spring or the coil that is powering the jack-in-the-box. That is all my straining did. That's all our straining to get away from mental pain can ever do. Potentiate that mental pain. Maybe temporarily successfully obliterate it so we don't know it's there, but then we make up for it later on because it comes back to us with bells on. It comes back to us way worse than it was in the starting off point. And that's a torment that we have inflicted on ourselves without knowing it. So then we can say something about, well, what would be a helpful thing to do. So straining to get away from the thing we want to be separate from or separated from is not helpful, psychologically speaking. So what is helpful then is not to strain. So if we can learn not to strain, which also means not to be aggressive or not to fight, not to try to combat anxiety or beat depression, all this fine fighting talk. If we can learn not to be violent and be like Gandhi, who achieved what he wanted to achieve, but he didn't do it by violence, despite the fact that he was in a very vulnerable and weak position. One single human being wrapped in a blanket against the might of the British Empire. But he succeeded, but not by fighting. So fighting isn't so great, even though we can get all fired up about the talk of fighting and combating and beating and winning and succeeding. We'll get fired up about that, but it's all pure moonshine, because that's not how things get done. The way things get done in neurosis is not by beating the problem, which creates a polarity, which creates an issue, it's by outgrowing the problem. We become bigger than it, and that means we can allow it because it's no longer such a big deal. It's not all determining, it's no longer all important. We're actually bigger than that problem, so we don't have to spend our whole lives fighting against it. And the funny thing about that is, well, not so funny I suppose, but the particular thing about that is that you can't outgrow a problem on purpose, because if you do, you're not actually outgrowing the problem, you're reacting to it. Everything about you is still trying to get away from that problem, so you think, I know, I'll outgrow it. But you're not outgrowing anything, you're just striving to be separate from the problem, which potentiates the problems, and you're never getting away from it at all. So we know we can't outgrow the problem on purpose. Growth is not a purposeful thing. I mean, you could ask a tree, does it grow on purpose? What are your goals in growing? Do you set goals? Do you set a goal of being able to grow 2 centimeters in the next 6 months? And if not, why not? We're fixated on these bloody goals. And what that means is we're fixated on purposefulness, and that means we're fixated on personal will. We just want to make it happen, to force it to happen. And if we can't get it to happen by forcing, then we think it's because we're not forcing enough. We never see this willfulness. It's us trying to make it happen as being the problem itself. Which means that the helpful thing is not trying to make anything in particular happen. Not trying to force things to be any particular way, but just essentially letting things be as they are, or getting on with the way things that they are, without picking a fight with it, if that's at all possible. And obviously most of the time we can't help picking a fight with it, because as I was saying, the urge to get away from the pain is involuntary, it takes us over. But as part of the long drawn out process, and it is a long drawn out process of discovering that striving to get away from our pain makes the pain worse, something changes in us, and we do learn to become a bit more peaceful in ourselves, a bit more still in ourselves, not so reactive. In other words, we learn as a result of the pain that comes every time we try to strive. Every time I try and strive to get away from my mental pain, that mental pain gets worse. That will eventually percolate into my consciousness, and I'll realize that I'm making it worse. And out of that realization will come a change, and the change is I won't believe in this anymore. I won't believe that straining more will make the pain go away. I will still be straining because it's automatic and because it overrides me and because it controls me. But I won't believe in it so much. There'll be part of me looking on, seeing what I'm doing and kind of saying, well, there I go again. And learning from that, because that is a process of learning. Even if I can't stop myself straining, I'm learning from the experience of not being able to stop myself straining. I'm becoming wise to this thing that we could quite reasonably say that the average Joe Soap doesn't have any awareness of this thing, i.e. the counterproductivity of trying to escape from mental pain. Most of us would never have any reason to become acquainted with this principle. But if you throw us into a situation where this is the dominant fact of our lives, our mental pain and our exacerbated mental pain as a result of trying to escape from the mental pain, then we're thrown into a particular learning situation. And it really doesn't help this learning situation for professionals to come along and insinuate or imply or state outright that there is a correct way to strain or strive to get away from the mental pain. Because that just confuses us, because we're learning by this slow and very painful process, but which is nevertheless the correct and proper way for anyone to learn anything, because learning doesn't happen in their head as a result of studying a page or regurgitating stuff in an exam. Learning happens on, it's almost like on a cellular level or a deep down level, on the level of your very bones, as a result of personal experience, which unfortunately involves pain. This type of learning happens because of we learn through the pain. And as your man says, whose name I can't remember, there's no such thing as gaining wisdom without pain. We can't just shortcut that pain and find out the smart way to do it without going through the pain. Even though, of course, we would very, very much like to. This learning process is our own learning process. It's not shared. It's not echoed back at us by people around us. And for this reason, it's fragile. If a bunch of people come up to me and start confusing me with crap about how there's a right way to escape from mental pain, or deal with mental pain, or manage it, or regulate it, or whatever the hell, influence it with my will, subject it to my will, then that confuses me, and that little delicate awareness or wisdom that's coming into being inside me gets squashed. So that's one way in which, as mental health care professionals, we can actually really confuse and even thwart the learning process that is at the heart of neurosis. Okay, thanks for watching.